Salutations, sentient lifeforms, Swifto here, and welcome to part 2 of my Nintendo DS Nostalgia Fest, where we celebrate 20 years of fond feelings for that special double-screen device of sensational delights. If you haven't watched part 1 of this DS Nostalgia special, please do feel free to stop watching this video and go and watch that first, where I focus my thoughts and memories of the handheld console itself. This second part, however, is focused purely on the games for the system. And as I said in part 1, this isn't so much a review of these games, but more just me simply sharing thoughts and memories in a kind of casual way, talking of my own personal experiences and memories attached to these games, so I may ramble off into subjects which are irrelevant to the game at times, and I may also express opinions of the games which you disagree with. But you know, I'm not a professional reviewer or YouTube content creator. I just make these videos for a bit of fun and to share with like-minded people who also want to share thoughts and memories of their games in a polite and casual way. So if you have any thoughts and memories of DS games that you had back in the day that you would like to share, so long as you're respectable, please feel free to do so in the comments of this video. Alright, and now with all that out the way, let me share with you a handful of the games I had for the DS over the years. Some of these are my favourites, and others most definitely are not. And of course there will be plenty of great DS games which I'll miss out here because I never owned or played, so please feel free to share your favourites in the comments. I already talked a little about Mario 64 DS in part 1, so I don't want to go into great detail here, but I just had to mention it, as it was the first game that got me interested in the DS and the first one that I bought for it, using my birthday money that I got on that same birthday I got my original DS. I've played it and completed it multiple times, at least for getting to the last Bowser fight. I think I managed to get all the stars at least once, or very close to it. I'm not sure now, I can't remember. But unfortunately my copy of the game seems to have developed some kind of weird issue where the data keeps getting corrupted, so I can't play through the game anymore, which is kind of annoying. And I've also lost access to all the great mini-games that you can unlock through catching the rabbits that are scattered around the castle, which I really wanted to show off in this video, but as I say, I can't really do that because I've lost my data. Regardless, this is still a great game. I've heard a few people say that they think this is a bad port of Mario 64, and I'm really not sure why. I did see someone, when I was looking this up, complain about this game because of the touch controls, which, like I said in part 1 of this DS Nostalgia video, there were a lot of games that shoehorned in some awful touch controls. But the thing is, you don't actually have to use them in this game. You can just use the buttons as normal, so it's really not a huge issue. Now don't get me wrong, I do like the original N64 version as well, and I understand its importance as one of the first fully 3D platformers, but for me the DS version is just so much more fun. Perhaps that's just the nostalgia talking, but this is my preferred way to play Mario 64. Plus the addition of the minigames really showcased what could be done with the DS's touchscreen and gave the game a lot of added value. I love the music of Mario 64 too, really adds to the fun of the game, and with the DS version adding extra stars and improving the graphics, this is a must-have for Mario fans on the DS. Age of Empires Age of Kings is not only one of the first DS games that I ever got, but it's also one of my favourites on the system. I know a few Age of Empire fans hate this game because it's a turn-based game rather than the real-time strategy games that Age of Empires normally are. I imagine the reason for this decision was due to the limitations of the DS, which would run real-time strategy games very poorly, I would imagine. I, however, have always preferred turn-based over real-time, as I enjoy taking my time to think about my next move, rather than the frantic mess of pumping out wave after wave of units like you would with a real-time strategy game. I wasted so many hours playing this game and I still enjoy going back to it every now and then. The only real criticism I have of the game is that it's kind of easy, even with the AI set to hard difficulty. And that's not just me bragging or anything, because I'll be the first to tell you that I'm terrible at strategy games, even though I love them. In my experience, the AI seems to pretty much play the same way every time you play in the same map. So once you work out how they go about things, they're very easy to predict and win every time. A brilliant strategy which I came up with for this game when I used to play multiplayer with my old friend Chris was when he was doing well and beating me at the game, I'd simply switch off my DS and say, "Oh no, I've run out of battery," or "My DS mysteriously disconnected somehow." It didn't mean I would win, of course, but it did deprive him of his victory. Unfortunately, he learned to use this tactic against me when I was beating him at Mario Kart. This game has several short campaigns with different leaders to play as, such as Joan of Arc and Genghis Khan. You can unlock additional units and maps to play on. The game also has a ranking system where you start off, I think, as peasant and then end up as emperor. Due to becoming Emperor Swifto in this game, I ended up using this title in the early days of my YouTubing hobby, and came up with this silly, short-lived character known as Emperor Swifto, or occasionally just shortened to just the Emperor. He only appeared in a few of my early videos before I quickly got tired of the idea and left him to fade into the void of lame ideas, which takes up a huge space in my memory, because I have so many lame ideas. They also released a DS version of Age of Mythology. Unfortunately, the DS version of Age of Mythology wasn't quite as good, which I didn't really enjoy so much. I'm glad I never saw it back in the day and wasted my money on it. Bit of a shame really, as Age of Empires was so much fun. Mario Kart DS, like most Mario Kart games, is just solid, simple fun. In fact, for many years, Mario Kart DS was my favourite in the series. I think I probably like 8 more now, just because it has a lot more stuff in it, but I haven't played 8 nearly as much as I did the DS version back in the day. But of course these days I have so many more games, so that plays a big part of it as well. But DS Mario Kart was the first Mario Kart that I really got into. I only played a little bit of Mario Kart 64 and Super Circuit at friends' houses, and I owned a copy of Double Dash on GameCube, but never really got into that one as much. I think if I recall correctly, Mario Kart DS was the first Mario Kart to include tracks from previous games, and it felt, in a way, like a much bigger and more enjoyable game than Double Dash. This is another one I enjoyed playing multiplayer with, as I mentioned already, with my old friend Chris, and also with my little brother occasionally as well. The game had a battle mode too, and a couple of varieties to mess around with, and several battle arenas. I remember having a lot of fun with these, even just playing around with myself and the AI. I played the hell out of Mario Kart DS, and even though I'm rubbish at most games, I actually got pretty decent at it. So much so that I could easily win against Chris, or whoever else tried to beat me. I'm sure if I had the ability to play online back in the day, I would have probably come across many people who were far better than me at Mario Kart DS. But for a brief moment in time, in my own tiny little social bubble, I felt like the Grand Master of Mario Kart DS. I'm sure I'd be very rusty at it these days and could easily be beaten, but I don't care. I would love to get the chance to get a few friends together one day and have some kind of online Mario Kart DS game going. Not sure how to set that up though, but I'm sure it could be a laugh. A cool feature of the DS version of Mario Kart was how it used the second screen. At any time in the race, you could switch between a map of the full track or a zoomed in section of the map, around your immediate proximity. This was actually very handy and also kept the top screen nice and clear from the usual clutter that you get in most racing games. I don't know why, but having the other racers' info below actually made it easier for me to keep track of them. Important for spotting red shells, and more importantly for blue shells. You could see when a blue shell was going to go off, so you could slow down and let the guy behind you take it, and then continue in first place. It doesn't always work, mind you. Having this other perspective of the track on the lower screen was great. It kind of made the ink squid pointless, as you could just look down at the bottom screen. In fact, I've even tried a few races just by looking purely at the bottom screen the whole time, and managed to win just as easily as I would from looking at the top screen. Though it's a little less interesting looking, I have to admit. Another fun little feature of the DS version of Mario Kart was the ability to draw your own custom emblems to put on your vehicle, which just gave an extra little fun feature for you to play around with, which I always appreciate. I love this game and it is very recommended by me if you enjoy other Mario Kart or kart type racing games. So this next game I want to showcase isn't exactly the greatest game in the world, but I wanted to show it off because it's one that I bought early on in the days of the DS, and I've played it perhaps slightly worryingly too much. The Sims 2 on DS is, well, let's just say, kind of interesting, My first ever experience with The Sims was The Sims Busting Out on the Game Boy Advance. I was a little disappointed at it at first, as it's more of an adventure kind of game, rather than the house building, sim creating simulation game that I was expecting. However, I quickly grew to really like The Sims Busting Out, and I've always felt that people give the portable Sims games a little bit of an unjustified hard time. Okay, so they're not the simulation games you'd expect, and they're not even the greatest adventure games, but for some reason, I have a little bit of a soft spot for them, due to their weirdness and quirky style. The Sims 2 was released on pretty much every system of the time, from PC to PS2, Game Boy Advance, and PSP. What was kind of cool about all these different versions of The Sims 2 was that each one was different. Well, the PS2, GameCube and the Xbox all had the same versions as far as I can see. But the Game Boy Advance, PSP and DS versions were all different games, with different stories, but using a lot of the same characters and assets in different ways. The DS version had your Sims character drive into Strangetown and break down. You mean the car breaks down? The sim doesn't break down. Or maybe they do, maybe that's why the game's so weird, maybe they have a mental breakdown. Anyway, the DS version starts off with your Sims character driving into Strangetown and their car breaking down. For some reason this leads to you becoming the manager of Strangetown's best and only hotel. You'll then have to do tasks for people around town and more importantly, the guests in your hotel. You'll fight with aliens, work with the mafia, meet Bigfoot and become Ratman. Yeah, I told you the game was a little weird, didn't I? What really makes this game stand out in my mind for me, however, is the wide variety of mini-games that you can find. Some of which are weird card games, which I never played much of because I'm not really into card games. Other fun things you can do include screwing around with this little keyboard thing to make silly little tunes of your own. I'm slightly embarrassed to admit that I wasted a lot of time playing around with this. I remember wishing that it had a bit more to screw around with, but it was pretty basic, but still kind of fun.
Farts.
This was before I had a real life keyboard to mess around with. I always wanted to make my own music back then, but I didn't have a keyboard at that time, so this was pretty much all I had and was the best that I could get to play around with. You can also draw little drawings, which random Sims will just randomly buy at random times for a random amount of money based on how good the game thinks your drawing is, which seems to be kind of random. I found it fun to try copying some 8-bit pixel art, and I remember being quite proud of this Samus from Metroid picture that I made. They're harder to find and play due to them being something which only randomly appears in the shop, but there are also these arcade machines in the game which, unlike the Sims Busting Out and the Urbs, you can actually play. What I did was keep a hotel room empty so that no other Sims would go in and trash the place as they so often do, and I kept this room to store all the arcade machines in, as your room in the hotel doesn't quite have enough space for them all. I remember getting really into the Space Invaders one and spent way more time playing that than the actual game. The other arcade games are not as great. Some of them are kind of fun, but then you get ones like this pool game, which at first I thought was going to be like a bar table game pool thing, you know, sort of like the snooker or billiards or whatever. But no, it's an actual swimming pool simulator, which is just kind of like, okay then. But maybe that's the joke, I don't know. This game is very weird. Big Brain Academy is one of those weird quirky titles which were quite common on the DS that was aimed at a more mainstream audience. I know there would have been a few games like that on computers and other systems before the DS, but as far as I'm aware, this was really the first time that I remember it being kind of a big deal. The DS, along with the Wii, were the first game systems that I can recall at least that tried to go for an older audience, with all kinds of strange puzzle type games, most of them being utter shovelware crap, destined for a life on the shelves of so many charity shops. I can even remember a few advertisements at the time, with weird B-list celebrities just trying their hand at this newfangled video game thing, as if it hadn't been a thing already since the fucking 70s. Yeah, it was kind of a weird time to be a young video game player and seeing all these crap games aimed at crap adults who would no doubt buy the thing as a novelty before quickly getting bored of it and going back to their, I don't know, knitting or complaining about foreigners and whatever else old people like to do. Big Brain Academy was a little different in that it was actually kind of fun. With its more cartoony graphics and slightly silly idea of weighing brains, it stood out from the rest of these dull brain training type games. This is a game which my little brother had back in the day, and so years later I ended up getting a copy of it myself, just for nostalgia really. I can remember one holiday staying over at my gran's, and my brother and I had shots at seeing who had the bigger brain. With it being a puzzle game, my mum even had a shot of it too. She's not big into video games, but she does like puzzle games, so it was kind of funny to see her playing the DS. I was quite proud of the fact that, according to the game, I had the biggest brain of the three of us. Though to be fair, my brother was just a little kid at the time, and my mum wasn't as used to the DS as we were, so I'm sure that had a lot to do with it. Though the game is fun in short goes, to be honest, I feel like there isn't much to this game. You have a small number of little puzzle games which are supposed to train your brain or whatever, each with a time limit. You are then assessed at the end of the time to see how well you did, and that's about it. The main part of this game is the test, which will give you one mini-game of each category all at once, and then give you a score, which determines how big your brain is. A kind of fun, silly thing it will then do is determine what kind of brain you have for various occupations. In my experience, it usually comes up with something really dull like librarian or investor. At least that's what it gives me all the time. I'm not sure what they're trying to tell me there. It's never anything fun or exciting. Some of the puzzles are kind of fun, if a little repetitive, but as someone with learning difficulties who gets very bored very quickly of maths questions, you can probably guess which category I had the least amount of fun with. It's kind of shallow gameplay, but in short goes, maybe with friends or family, it's not a bad wee puzzle game really. Professor Layton and the Curious Village is one of the best games on the DS in my opinion. It's a kind of point and click adventure with puzzle games. It has a very nice art style, and even some animated sequences which are fully voice acted and look as though they've been pulled straight from an actual movie. This was another game that my little brother had originally, and I loved it so much that I had to go and get a copy of it for myself. Being a puzzle game, it was also another one that my mum had a shot of as well, when we were staying at my gran's house. And just to clarify, this isn't the same Glasgow gran who came to visit us on my birthday that I got my DS. This was my other gran on my mum's side of the family, who lived on an island in the west of Scotland, in a somewhat remote little cottage, with not much else to do other than go for walks on the beach or sit and play my DS. But anyway, getting back to the game, as I say, I think it is one of the best games on the DS. I'm not the biggest fan of point and click adventure games. I like the odd one now and then, don't get me wrong, but I haven't played an awful lot of them. But Professor Layton, on the other hand, managed to capture my attention long enough for me to complete it, despite its maths puzzles. It's a fun and silly mystery story, with every character in the village being weirdly obsessed with puzzles and riddles. I enjoy the riddles most of all, as I love wordplay and trying to work out the logic of such things. I hated the maths puzzles. Did I already mention that I am not a fan of maths puzzles? Yeah, not my thing. I wish there wasn't so many of them. Still, most of the puzzles are fun, and even with the difficult ones, they are very satisfying to solve once solved. There were a couple of them which I really didn't understand and only managed to complete through blind luck, but the vast majority of them were good and fairly fun, and the game is quite addicting for a short while. I remembered having this little promotional booklet for Curious Village, which also helped get me interested in the game. Can't remember where I got this, but if I had to guess, I think it probably came free from an issue of Official Nintendo magazine, which I used to get from time to time. I didn't even realise it until I went looking for this booklet for this video, but apparently I also have the one for the sequel, Pandora's Box. Yeah, I don't even recall ever having this one, but apparently I do, so that's weird. Speaking of Pandora's Box, I also have several of the other Professor Layton games, and I have put a little bit of time into that second game, but for whatever reason it just didn't capture my attention like this first one did. I really like this first game and I really wish I could get into the other games, but I just haven't got round to it, I guess. Bit of a shame really, as I really feel like it is a bit of a underrated series as far as Nintendo games go. But yeah, I've still to play through the later ones in the series. Curious Village has a special place in my memory and I really love it, despite its maths puzzles. Anno 1701 Dawn of Discovery on DS was my first experience of the Anno series. I remember seeing this game in games magazines of the time, and being a bit of a fan of strategy and management games like SimCity, I saw this and I thought I would give it a shot. It's based on the PC version of Anno 1701, and this plays pretty much like every other Anno game ever made. You start off with a ship, you go exploring the map to find an island to settle, and then you build a few houses until you need to build a lumber mill for wood. From there, things start to spiral out of control as you try to balance your citizens' needs, your profits and resources, as well as the occasional bit of conflict from the neighbours, who you can invade and take over their islands, or wait for them to attack you. I find these kind of games very addicting and always find whole hours of my life being wiped away from me as I lose track of time. This is one of those times, as I was saying before, when the touch controls really make sense. With these kinds of games, it's always a little clunky and awkward playing them on consoles with a controller. It's just so much easier and fun playing them on PC when you can just click and stuff with the mouse, rather than having to slide around the map with a joystick and do some weird button combinations to do simple things, as is often the case with console ports of simulation management games. But the DS with its touchscreen actually, for the first time that I'm aware, managed to find a decent alternative for a handheld console. It's easy enough just to use the stylus pen to click on things and move them around the map. Anno 1701 is a lot of fun, but it does eventually get to a point where it becomes slightly tedious and annoying. Certain buildings having such a small influence radius can be annoying and often limits how you'd like to build your town, as you want to try and get every house within the radius of every type of building so that they have all their needs satisfied to level up to give you more gold. And then if they happen to be just outside of the limit, they get all moody and give you abuse. Like seriously, you can't just walk a few meters from your house to the tavern. What's wrong with these people? It's kind of funny in some ways though, when you eventually get aristocrats in your settlement and they get really angry and act like it's the end of the world because they aren't getting enough chocolates and perfume. Talk about first world problems. Like many kids of the late 90s and early 2000s, I was a huge Pokemon fan and absolutely loved playing my copies of Pokemon Red, Gold and Crystal. Through Pokemon, I actually made a few friends in primary school, and there was a time when people came to me for help with the games. Sometimes just for advice, but I do remember one time some kid got stuck on Victory Road and I had to help him through it for him. Unfortunately for me, by the time the third generation Pokemon games came out, the whole Pokemania of the late 90s had thoroughly died out, at least where I lived. Pokemon was now considered to be extremely lame, and you were very uncool if you still played Pokemon. There was one time in my local Blockbusters when I came very close to buying one of the Game Boy Advance Pokemon games, but then a friend of mine from school walked in and I was too much of a pussy to admit that I'd been looking at it, and pretended that I was looking at something else instead. As a result of this, I completely missed out on the third generation Pokemon, and it was only when Pokemon Diamond and Pearl came out that I got back into it again. Unfortunately, I have to say I was a little bit disappointed by Pokemon Pearl when I first played it. I don't really know why I thought this at the time, but having loved the fact that Pokemon Gold had not only the Johto region but the Kanto region too, I got it into my head that that's just what the Pokemon games did. So I was a little disappointed when I played Pokemon Pearl and it only had its one new region. I know it seems a little silly in retrospect, but I was just a dumb teenager back at that time, and honestly I thought each game would have all the older regions too, so I was very disappointed that this was not the case. But now that I'm just a dumb adult though, I realise how stupid this thought was, and I can appreciate the game for what it does have rather than what it doesn't have. Back then though, I was also a little unimpressed with what the game added, feeling that it didn't add much, and kind of felt like more of the same. But looking at it again with a more open mind now, I feel that it isn't as bad as I thought. I mean, sure, it is true that Pokemon has stuck mostly with the same formula all these years, but compared to some of the later Pokemon games, I honestly think that Pearl is pretty decent after all, even if it doesn't feel all that exciting or original. I have now come to appreciate it a little bit more in recent times. I also had Pokemon Soul Silver, which was a fun remake of the second gen games, which came with this weird Tamagotchi thing called the Pokemon Walker. Can't really say much about it though, as I never used mine, but I just thought I would acknowledge it as a thing which exists. This is more just a personal gripe, I guess, but I'm also not fond of the idea of having your Pokemon follow behind you all the time, so I didn't really like that aspect of Soul Silver. But other than that, it's still a pretty fine remake of Gen 2 Pokemon. Sadly though, due to my disappointment of Pearl, I never got into the other Pokemon games on the DS. I have heard that Black and White are supposed to be pretty good, but it wasn't until Pokemon Sun on the 3DS that I tried to get into Pokemon again, and was once again just sort of underwhelmed by it. In my head I kind of refer to Pokemon Sun as a tutorial simulator, because that game never stops holding your hand. I have since then though gone back and played Pokemon Emerald, and found it pretty good, so I think I will give Pearl another chance one day, and see if my opinion of it has changed since I first played it back in 2007. Pokemon Pearl was also the last time that I ever did a Poke Battle with a human. I played against my little brother, who had Pokemon Diamond at the time. He wiped the floor with me and handed me my arse. It was a little bit humiliating, I have to say. So much for me being something of a Pokemon guru back in primary school. I got beat by my kid brother, and he wasn't even into Pokemon as much as I was. Alas, I shall never be a Pokemon master. Shall never be the very best, like no one ever was. Metroid Prime Hunters. Ah yes, this game was just so much fun. The first hunt demo of the game was my first experience of the Metroid series, and I was impressed enough by it to want to go out and buy the first Metroid Prime on GameCube. The date on the back of the box says 2006, which means it only came out a year after I got my DS in 2005, but I seem to remember it being a much longer period of time waiting for this game to come out. The idea of playing a fully 3D FPS game on a handheld was such a cool novelty for me at the time, and I was very hyped having the demo to play around with for a year beforehand, dreaming of the day that this game would come out and I would get the full experience of it. What was particularly cool about this game when I read about it in games magazines was that it felt like it was going to be huge and really open up the Metroid universe. They promised a new kind of Metroid experience where we would actually get to fly with Samus to multiple planets and battle 6 new bounty hunters who would all have their own unique abilities. I really enjoyed this game and had a lot of fun with it, even with the weird decision to make the left shoulder button fire and the right shoulder button jump. It would have made more sense to me to make it the other way around, but You can also use the touchpad to look around instead of the buttons, but I never really liked this. A classic example of a DS game having gimmicky touch controls, which are just kind of rubbish. Sadly, as much as I enjoy this game, I have to be honest and say, while it's fun at first, the idea of moving from planet to planet, it does get old pretty quickly, with each planet essentially being a small level, each with a different theme, and travelling to them with the little radar screen on the touchscreen isn't exactly the most exciting thing. The other thing is that some of the bosses are kind of repetitive, the final boss is a bit of a letdown, and the game overall is just kind of pretty easy to be honest with you, with not much challenge to it. Then there's the new bounty hunters who all have some ability which you can gain after defeating them. This is a cool idea, however the thing with this is that they appear at various places and will continue to do so throughout the game. And while it is fun to fight them the first time, there are parts of the game where you have to backtrack to previous planets, but then you see a certain bounty hunter is currently there and you're like, oh great, guess I have to fight this guy again to progress through the game. But even with its somewhat tedious repetition, the game is still a lot of fun and I've enjoyed playing through it a few times now. This was another game I enjoyed having multiplayer sessions with my friend Chris. Unlike Age of Empires, which he normally beat me at, and Mario Kart, which I normally beat him at, we were pretty evenly matched at Hunters as I recall. I really like how you can choose between the bounty hunters and try out playing as them. Trance was pretty fun to play with due to his sniper ability, always fun to snipe opponents from across the map. But Chris and I quickly soon discovered that Kandin was pretty much the most overpowered character, so we often played as him. though I also remember Chris beating me with Weevil. He enjoyed his ability to split in two and having a double attack. Devious bastard. Even just playing by myself with the bots was fun for a while, and I have a lot of fond feelings for this game. Unfortunately, I also have kind of a negative memory attached to this game too, and it's hard for me to think about Hunters now without thinking about this little incident. I don't know what it's like in other places, but here in Scotland at least, when I was in high school, the end of the school year at the beginning of the summer holidays was usually a time of frantically getting things finished before the end of the year, and then having the last few days of school pretty much doing nothing and taking it easy for the most part, while the slow and lazy ones who still hadn't finished everything yet for the year had time to get ready for the next year. I remember that last day of third year I showed up to my biology class, and I was the only one who had bothered to show up. I'd always kind of liked my biology teacher that I had that year. He was a pretty laid back, easygoing kind of guy. Nice and understanding normally. At the start of that year I had been in the biology class below his one, but I did well on my tests and got moved up to his class. I was very proud of myself for achieving this because as someone with learning difficulties, I was often put in the lowest classes, pushed down by my teachers and not given much encouragement to make me think that I could ever do well in school. In fact, the only reason why I took biology was because my physics teacher the year before told me that I was better off not taking physics because I was shit at maths. Did I mention that I hate maths puzzles already? I really wish I'd had the guts to stand up to my physics teacher the year before and defy him by taking physics, because I dreamed of getting into astronomy as a kid and wanted to do something with my life which involved space or something else similar to it. Time travel. That's not a joke. But I took biology instead, and I focused really hard on learning all I could, because unlike a lot of my school classes, I actually did care for the sciences and wanted to prove to everyone that I was not just some idiot not worth teaching. That's why I studied hard and did so well on my test that I got moved up a class. I was so proud, and I really felt like I'd achieved something that day when I got moved up to this other class. Unfortunately for me, most of the other students in this class didn't seem to care about biology as much as I did, and kinda used the biology class as an excuse to have a bit of a carry-on and a breather from the other classes of the day. It didn't help much that our teacher was just a little bit too laid back and let them clown around and not get much work done. I was a little disheartened to learn that even the lower class, which I had come from, had actually got further in their year's work than we had. After I had worked so hard to prove myself worthy of being in this supposedly higher level class. Anyway, on that last day of the year, I was the only one who showed up for biology that day, and the teacher in his usual gentle manner just sort of smiled, shrugged his shoulders and said pretty much take it easy for the rest of the class. So I sat down at my desk and took my DS out and started playing some Metroid Hunters. Everything was pretty quiet, and I expected just to play my game for an hour until class was finished, and then go for my lunch. My biology teacher was standing out in the hallway having a conversation with one of the other teachers. I could see him through the window of the door, and it seemed like they were just having a friendly, pleasant chat with each other. It went on like this for about half an hour, until my biology teacher came back into the class and started shuffling things around on his desk. He then called me down to the front of the class and sat on the edge of his desk. I put my DS away and obliged with his request, not thinking anything of it. Then, just randomly, completely out the blue, he started having this very angry rant at me about how I was wasting time playing video games and telling me, almost as if he felt that it was entirely my fault, that the class was falling behind and that I wasn't putting in enough work. Which is kind of ironic, considering what I just told you about how hard I'd worked to get in this class. And apparently he was just extremely disappointed by this year's class and how badly they had been doing, and that he had never had a class as bad as this one before. And it just went on and on like this for the rest of the class. I had a whole half hour of just standing there awkwardly, listening to this crazy old man lecture me about how I was wasting time playing stupid games and not taking his class seriously, and how I was never going to get anywhere in life if I didn't start taking things more seriously. You know, despite the fact that I was the only one who showed up that day and really worked hard to get into his class in the first place, and yeah, it was such a horrible experience, and it was just so random and unexpected. And to think I used to like this guy. But he turned out to be mental, and I felt so upset and hurt by his comments that I have never forgotten about it, and I never will forgive him for it. After working so hard to get into his class in the first place, trying so hard to keep going while everyone else took the mick, I was the only one who even bothered to show up that day, and that's how he treats me. I was so shocked by the experience I came out of that class shaking. I didn't have lunch that day, I was just too upset. And even to this day it still pisses me off. And now, unfortunately, whenever I see Metroid Prime Hunters, I'm just reminded of that crazy old nutcase and his angry rant about how I was wasting time playing games. Yep, I wasted so much time playing games over the years, gaining friends through them, sharing my love of them online with people, inspiring me to create YouTube videos. Such a waste of time. Whereas my biology studies, on the other hand, I can't remember the last time I urgently needed to know about germination in my day-to-day life. So as much as I love Metroid Prime Hunters, unfortunately I do have that negative association with it. But it's still a great game all the same, and I try to remember the fun times playing multiplayer with friends rather than that incident. And now on to some slightly happier memories with SimCity DS. I played SimCity 2000 on the Game Boy Advance before this, but to be honest I don't think I ever really understood how that game worked, and it did feel somewhat lacking. Of course the PC version of SimCity 2000 is a classic game, but as someone who grew up in a household that couldn't afford a PC at that time and had to make do with not so great console ports of PC games, I was starved of good strategy and management games. SimCity was one that I always wanted to play, but I couldn't due to the lack of a home computer. Like I say, the Game Boy Advance port of SimCity 2000 didn't really do it for me. But then I played the DS version, and it was just the kind of game I had been wishing for all these years, being jealous of rich kids with their PCs. Finally, I had a city management game that I could understand and really get into. I did also have SimCity Creator on the Wii around the same time, which was kind of cool, but I have no idea how I managed to play it so much back in the day, trying to fight with those damn Wii controls. I can remember trying to draw roads with the Wii controls, and yeah, it wasn't exactly the best experience. The controls on SimCity DS are a little awkward too, but it's not so bad, and is very playable once you get used to it. One kind of weird quirk about this version of SimCity is the advisors. When you start the game for the first time, you'll be asked a few questions, which somehow determines who your advisor will be. As you would expect from an advisor, they will give you advice on how to run your city, and act as a kind of tutorial in the early part of the game. More often than not though, I just find them very annoying, and wish they'd just shut the hell up and let me run my city into the ground if I desire to do so. You can change the advisor if you want, but I have no memory of how to do this at this point in time. I think you just have to keep chatting to them until the right chat thing pops up, but I can't recall how it works because it's been a while since I've played this game fully. But the advisors are pretty much just a gimmick that gets old pretty quickly. Other than asking for advice, you can chat with them and they will normally give you some weird, irrelevant piece of information about their boring lives and boring personality. Seriously, I don't like any of these people. I think the robot is the most interesting one of the lot, and that's only because he's a robot. The game has other weird little gimmicks as well, such as these mini games which involve using the touchscreen. Like this one, where you have to click on Santa as many times as you can to get a nice little money bonus. Which leads me to believe that you're just stealing Santa's presents and selling them for yourself. You know, upstanding mayor stuff. The other slight annoyance with this game is the citizens of the city, who will never stop bothering you about their issues and ideas about how they think you should run your city. After so many hours playing this game, I got sick and tired of this one old lady who kept bothering me to build more hospitals. Even after I went crazy and turned my city into nearly nothing but hospitals, she still complained that there wasn't enough hospitals. How many hospitals does one old woman need, for fuck's sake? But despite the annoyances of the demanding citizens and the boring advisors, this game is still really fun, and I had a blast making cities, taking care of people's needs, and then eventually getting tired and destroying everything I built. Something I wasn't aware of at the time, and only became aware of it more recently when I was watching one of LGR's videos on SimCity, was apparently this version is based on SimCity 3000. I haven't really played much of that one, so I wasn't really aware of this. But now that I am, I can see the similarities. So if you like SimCity 3000, then maybe you'll like this one too. Just once you get used to the slightly awkward touch controls. The DS version is still a lot of fun, and I was very happy back in the day when I had a proper city management game that I could play my holidays at my gran's or wherever. And thankfully, my gran never bothered me to build more fucking hospitals. SimCity DS is an excellent game, and I'd recommend it for anyone who is into these sort of city management games. And now we move on to not only the greatest game on the DS, but perhaps also the greatest game ever made. It is, of course, Peter Jackson's King Kong. No, not really. Well, you see, I couldn't make a video about the DS without including King Kong on DS, as it's become something of a running joke on my YouTube channels. Let me be frank, King Kong on DS is shit. I have heard that the other versions of King Kong are actually not bad. I've only played a little bit of it, but I did try to get into the Game Boy Advance and PSP versions, and it actually did seem pretty decent. But this DS version of King Kong, yeah, it's just shit. I'm not really sure what I was expecting when I bought it all those years ago. I saw those images in the back of the box and saw someone with a gun pointing at a dinosaur, King Kong punching the shit out of another dinosaur, and then a screenshot of King Kong up the Empire State Building from that classic, famous scene from the end of the movie. I thought there was going to be a really cool level where you played as King Kong and went on a rampage through New York, but nope, didn't happen. This screenshot is actually a bit misleading, as you don't get any level set in New York at all. It all takes place on Skull Island, and levels which all pretty much look the same. Dull, dark, rocky, foggy levels of blandness, with the same crappy enemies that don't really prove much of a challenge at all. Then at a certain point it tells you that they brought Kong to New York. He escapes and dies. End of game. No New York rampage, no satisfying big boss fight, nothing to unlock for completing the game. It just abruptly ends, after several lame levels on Skull Island that had a vague hint of the movie's story attached to it. This game is fug ugly, has awful touch controls, lame weapons that work sometimes if you're lucky, and I'm pretty sure they ripped off some of the music from the Predator film. I actually made a video about that a while ago if you want to go and watch it, though it's not a very good video, so I wouldn't really bother on watching it. But the short of it is, I'm pretty sure they've ripped off some of the music from Predator. Yeah, this isn't really a nostalgic game for me, but it did certainly give me some memories. Bad memories. King Kong DS has earned its shameful place in my memory of bad, disappointing games. But at least I've managed to get a few laughs out of it with friends online. People weren't enthusiastic about the prizes that was given out, so I'm going to ask you for a change. What would you like to win?
King Kong on DS.
I wasn't expecting that. Do you know what? You can have it. Actually, even if you don't win the quiz, you can have it. Originally I was going to end the video there with King Kong DS, but then I thought it would be kind of lame to leave on a bit of a downer and rubbish game. So instead I'm also going to include another good game on the DS. Let me now talk a little bit about New Super Mario Bros. Basically it's a fantastic Mario game, that's all I need to say really. It goes back to that old 2D Mario gameplay and is a lot of fun. This was the first in a long line of Mario games dubiously called new. Despite this game coming out in 2006 and being almost 20 years old at this point. Yeah, I don't like Nintendo's idea of putting new in the title of things. It's a bit silly. Even back in 2006 when the game really was new, I thought it was silly. And I was just a stupid teenager then. It's why I called my comedy channel New Celios, taking the piss out of Nintendo's naming convention. And the Premium Deluxe part is just kinda taking the piss out of both YouTube Premium and other such companies like Microsoft that like to make premium or deluxe versions of things for no real reason. Anyway, stupid name aside, New Super Mario Bros. Is just simple, solid fun. I love the art style and I love the music. And speaking of the music, I love the added detail of having the enemies react to the music. That was kind of fun. I played this game quite a lot and completed it back in the day. Unfortunately, I think I completed it a little bit too quickly, which is why I don't really have any memories attached to it. So not much to say other than it's a great game and very fun. It also comes with a whole lot of mini games like Mario 64 DS did, although I think most of these mini games are just the same ones from 64 DS. But I guess it's nice that they have them here for those people who didn't have 64 DS. I really like this game and would recommend it to any Mario fan, or people who are just fans of 2D platformers in general. So those were some of my thoughts and memories of some of the DS games I had back in the day. Like I said at the end of part 1, it's been really fun for me casting my mind back to the mid to late 2000s and remembering the DS as part of my own personal gaming history. I do often overlook the DS, but I know a lot of people love it, and for some it is their favourite handheld. For me though, most of my gaming nostalgia comes from the mid-90s up to the early 2000s, with the DS coming just on the very end of that time period. I mostly played my DS in my mid to late teens, a time in my life I'd rather not think about too much, as I didn't really have the best experience of high school or being a young adult. But regardless, I can still appreciate the Nintendo DS for the great handheld that it was. As I mentioned in part 1, I got my original DS on my birthday of 2005. I remember it because it was one of only a small handful of times that my gran from Glasgow came to visit us. I unfortunately didn't really get to know her that well, as she passed away the following year in 2006. But whenever I take my original DS out of its drawer and look at it for a bit of nostalgia, I think back to that birthday and remember my Glasgow gran that I never really got to know that well. In the following years, I often took my DS with me on holiday when I went to visit my other gran. She lived on an island with not much to do for a kid, so having a good handheld to play over there on the island was very helpful against the boredom. Now my other gran is gone too, and I don't really travel much these days, so I don't really have much need for a handheld. So often my DS just sits in the drawer with my other handhelds and doesn't get used much, as I have more nostalgia for the Game Boys and play them more often. But then I'm reminded of great games like Curious Village and Mario Kart DS, Mario 64 DS, Age of Empires, Pokemon Soul Silver, and I think, what a fantastic library of games the DS had. And I know there are loads more out there that I've yet to play. So here's to you, Nintendo DS, more than 20 years later and still so much great games to touch and go. Thanks for listening to my rambling nonsense if you've made it this far. Please share your own thoughts and feelings on your favourite DS games if you have any, and farewell, my good sentient life forms.